Good afternoon. Who we have on the meeting? All right. So, good afternoon and good morning to some if you're joining from the West Coast. My name is LaVorce Brown. I'll be hosting the webinar for you today. This is part of our coffee break series on accounting. Today we will be covering general ledger budgets, how to set those up, which reports those are applicable to and how you can utilize those. And then we'll also be looking at departmental splits and how you can configure those in order to automate split allocations or expense allocations to your different departments or amongst your different profit centers if you have multiple. So I'll go through the webinar presentation first, and then we will save some time at the end for some Q&A. This webinar, again, will be recorded. There will be a link to the webinar recording that will be shared after the webinar. So if you have anybody that couldn't attend or if you just want it for a refresher, later on down the line, you'll have that recording available to you that you can follow the link and then download it. Okay. If there are no questions at the moment, I will go ahead and get started with the budget setup. So in our accounting system, in the general ledger input screen, so if you go into the edit menu and go to modify, you're going to jump down to the GL setup here. It's where you typically go to add, edit, delete, or deactivate ledger accounts from your chart. But also within this screen, there is a budget interface. So if you click on the button, you don't have to have a GL account pulled up on the screen at the time, but if you click on Add Modify Budgets here, it'll bring up our budget grid. So within that budget grid, just kind of go over the layout with you a little bit. You'll be able to identify budget by ledger account. So you got the GL account number here. The system's going to auto-populate the description for you. If you have multiple corporations, you can set the company numbers here. If you have a single company but you have multiple profit centers within that company, you can set the profit center designations here. Then you have your department. You can kind of stretch these fields out to see the full description, which will default if that account that you set has a default department set on it. And then you got your budget month. So it goes from 1 to 12, of course, all the way to the end of the grid. And then that last tab there will be your budget year here. All right, so that's where you set the year. And all of these columns can be sorted, filtered, etc. You can also print the budget if you like, if you want to print out the grid. And if you go to the bottom of that grid, you can add additional budget line items. So again, you start with the GL account and let it populate the description for you, and then you go on and put the profit center, department, and then the budget forecast for each month for that budget year. Right. So that's one way of manually creating the budget. Another option of creating budgets, you can go to the copy option here, and when you hit copy, it gives you the ability to copy a budget from a previous year to the new year. When you do that copy, you can choose whether you want to use the budget figures, which are the figures you entered into the actual budget grid, or whether you want to use the actual figures. So if your actual figures were above or below your budget, you can choose to use those figures to forecast your next year budget if you like. So you simply choose either of those options, and then you type in the past year, which is the year you want to copy from, and then the new year, which is the year you want to create the budget for. So in this case, if I wanted to create a budget for 2020, I would do 2019. New year would be 2020, of course. Let's say I want to copy off the budget figures, then I would hit copy. Right. In this case, it's telling me the new year already has a budget set up for it. So it asks me if I want to clear the budgets and copy the budgets from 2019. So I can still move forward with the copy, but it's just telling me that I already have some budget line items set for the 2020 year. All right, gives you another warning that the process will copy budgets from the previous year to the new year. Could take some time depending on how extensive your budget is, and then you can click yes if you want to continue, and then it'll say copy complete, and you can close that window and you'll notice, or you may not have noticed, but the screen kind of refreshed. So the scroll bar shifted a little bit, but there are your new 2020 budget figures. That's just the easy way to copy. Some other methods for creating your budgets is to hit the Create Budget button there. And then this one's going to give you two options. One option is based on last year, and so you get some filters here that you can use. So if you want to use that option, you want to say what percentage of the last year's budget you want to base it on. So I can say, okay, if I'm doing a forecast and revenue or something like that, and I want to do a 10% increase, I can do 10% to last year's budget there. You can base it on different account types. So again, if I want to focus specifically on an income forecast, I can do revenue account type. You can also do it on a specific GL account. So in that case, you wouldn't want to indicate an account type, but simply the GL account that you want to indicate. Right. And then you would go through each month and you would allocate that increase. So the key with the month-to-month increase or percentages, they all have to equal up to 100%. And then you would create the budget, and it'll look at your last year's numbers, and do a 10% increase on those, and that'll be your budget figure for the current year, or for the year you're budgeting for. Right. And then you also have the option to do a custom budget. So this one's based on an end-of-year amount. So if you forecast, I want to have $1 million in sales and new vehicle sales by the end of the year, then you can plug that figure in here, select the GL account. In this case, you have to select a specific GL account. And then if you have multiple profit centers, you want to select the profit center in which that's going to apply. Right. And then again, you'll do a distribution of how you expect that to forecast each month. Again, they all have to equal up to 100%. And then you hit Create Budget, and it'll say, okay, for your new vehicle income account, you got a plan to do $1 million in sales. It'll take that and it'll break it down by percentage month to month, and it'll create budgets for that account throughout the year for you. Right, so those are two additional ways to create budgets. The last method for creating budgets is actually not one that's displayed on the interface here, but the other option is to create a budget in Excel using the same format here of the screen, so account number, description, company number, profit center, etc. And then you can send that budget to us, and we can import that budget for you. So that's the other option. Probably when we go to our web version, we'd want to make that option available through the screen, where you just have an import button here. You can hit the import button, browse to a file, and just bring it in yourself. But if you do want to exercise that option now, you can send it over to our support team. Right. So once the budget's created, when you're looking at your financial reporting, so I'm going to jump over to the reporting module now. And if you go to your accounting reports, and the report that the budgets are going to affect primarily are your profit and loss report. So if you go to profit and loss, and you don't do the standard report, but you do a budget comparison option. I'll just use Profit Center A as an example. And then you can do show revenue only, or consolidate profit centers. You have multiple, but otherwise you're going to hit show report. And what it's going to do, I don't have budget set for a lot of these accounts except the salesperson comp and incentives. I got a $20,000 budget set, and it'll show you where you are currently to that budget when you run your income statement. And it'll show you the variance there, along with your year-to-date budget, and how you're varying to your year-to-date budget as well. So that's the reporting behind setting up the budgets for you. So at this point, I'm going to transition from talking about budgets. And if you guys have questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A if you like, so you don't forget, or you can hold them to the end, to the Q&A section. But I'm going to transition us now into speaking about the departmental splits. So again, back in your GL account setup here under Edit Modify, if you go into add modified GL accounts, right. And for this example, I'm going to utilize an expense account here. So we're going to say our advertising expense, for example. So in this case, you do have to select the specific account in which you would like to set those expense allocations up. When you open the account, if you go to the Departmental Splits tab here, and it looks like I actually already have some set up for this particular account. But basically what you would do here is you would set the GL number, which can be the same GL number as the expense. Set the company number. Again, if you have multiple corporations, you can select the corporation there. If you have multiple profit centers within a single company, then you'd want to set the profit center here. And that's if you want to split your expense or whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be an expense. It could be an income. It could be a cost of goods, whatever the case may be. But expense is usually the most common. So you can also split it by profit center, or you can split it between specific departments within the profit center. So kind of give you an idea on how our accounting system is structured. You have the company / corporation at the highest level. And then within that, you got profit centers. You can think of profit centers as rooftops, if you will. And then within each rooftop or profit center, you have departments. So, profit center A may have parts and service and sales and finance. And profit center B may just be a service center. So you just have a service and parts department under that profit center. So that's kind of the hierarchy of how that's all laid out. So in this case, I'm going to operate as one profit center within a single company. And then we're going to set the department here. So in this case, this is our advertising expense new. So it looks like we're giving 50% of that expense to the new sales department. And then we're giving 50% of that expense to the service department. All right, as long as they equal up to 100%, either by profit center or by company, then you can go ahead and save that expense allocation. All right, if they don't equal 100%, then it'll warn you. So if I do 25% here, and I were to try to save that, it would tell me that they have to equal 100%. Right. And again, you can break these splits down however you like. So some tips and tricks that I've encountered throughout the industry is some people will look at like how much square footage that particular department takes up in the dealership, and they'll kind of base or they'll weight the expense allocations based on that. So if you guys have any experience with that or around that, you can kind of come up with a formula that you'd like to use to kind of break the expenses down. But that's one of the more common ways I see it done. And it also depends on the expense itself. So, a fuel expense, you might bill more to the service department or something like that versus the sales department. So it just kind of depends on the expense and then the scenario and then a little bit on your philosophy as well. All right. So using a simplistic split like this, once we save that, what will happen is when you're making transactions, and that transaction can either be a manual transaction, it could be a recurring entry, it could be, you build that account on a service job or you build it on a PO, whatever the case may be. When it transfers to accounting and creates the journal entry, the system's going to automatically look to that account, look at the splits, figure out what the percentage breakdown is, and it's going to split that transaction automatically for you. So in this case, I'll just show you a manual entry. So if I'm going to add a transaction here, I'll just call it split. And we're going to say, okay, accounts payable. And then we'll plug in an entity number here. It's probably a bad example, but NTP is most common, so I know I have them in the database. And then our expense account was 8,001. And so let's say we're going to do $1,000 here and $1,000 to the expense. And then when I say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to save it. And you'll see the system automatically takes that expense expense amount, and it distributes it accordingly to each department based on my departmental split allocation. Right. So to do the same thing for you, if I were to build this same transaction as a GPO or general PO, when I post that general PO to accounting, it would handle it the same way. So it doesn't have to be a manual entry. It could be an automated entry, again, a recurring entry or any type of thing that creates an accounting transaction. If there's an split on expense account, then it will be handled for you. Right. Looks like we had a question out there from Sheila. You want to type your question into the QA, Sheila? Or if you can... Okay, looks like it's there. All right, question was, so before we get into that, that concludes our presentation, so I'm going to jump into the Q&A now. So I'll read the question first so the audience can hear, and then I'll answer it. So I got a question here from Sheila. What does the number represent in the department for the body shop account? And I'm going to assume you mean on the account description or department description. And really, it's just a way that some dealers like to order their department. So they'll put 1 body shop, 2 finance, 3 sales, whatever the case may be. And it's just kind of a way to order the list, if you will. If I'm understanding your question correctly. Oh, it says after you did the manual entry. Gotcha. Okay, so let's get back to that. Okay, so yeah, that represents, this account has an old default department on it that somebody's probably deleted, so it doesn't know what to put there. So in the transaction, it just places the department ID, which is in the database. You guys don't actually see that normally in the interface, but that's what caused that. Whatever department was set to this AP account was since deleted. I had a question here from Melissa. Is there a way to import the budget or the accounting splits using a CSV file from a spreadsheet? The budget, yes. The splits, I don't believe so. But I can check with if you contact our support department, they can raise that issue to our professional services team, and our conversions team is a part of that, and they can get you the answer on that. But I know budgets for sure. Splits, I'm 80% sure we can, but I want to confirm that. Right. Then I had a question from Sheila. It says balance sheet account. Could you elaborate on that for me, Sheila? While she's doing that, Melissa had a follow-up. How would we import the budget from a CSV file? Again, send the file to us as long as the file is in the budget, in the format of the budget screen. Let me jump back so you can see that. So again, there's no way within the interface to do it, but if you format a CSV file in this format, GL account number, description, company number, profit center, department, month 1 through 12, and then year, you can send that file over to us, and we can import it for you to create the budget. Gotcha, no problem. Let me know if that answers your question, Melissa. But going forward, in the future, we, in our web version, we should be able to build out an actual user import where you guys can do it yourselves without having to contact us. But if you want to import it now, that would be the way to go. Got a few questions in the chat. All right, question from Pauline. What is the budget bucket on the GL account? So that budget bucket was something that was in development to get the budgets into our DMS statement. That development paused or stopped. I don't know if that development is going to continue because we're kind of revamping our whole system. But that was the purpose of it. So as of now, it doesn't have a real purpose because the development wasn't completed on it. So if you see that, what she's speaking about here for everybody is this budget bucket number here. You guys don't have to populate any input there. But just to give you a little bit of background of what the purpose of it was for. All right, checking for more questions. I got a question from Sheila. Is there a way to have different versions of budgets? Different versions of budgets? No. There's just different methods for creating your budget, I would say. So again, it can be a manually created budget where you just go in and plug in the figures for each month, for each account. You can do it you can copy it based on previous year's figures, or you can create it based on an end-of-year goal or a percentage of last year's. So there's different ways to create a single budget, but you can't have different version. Like I have one budget for 2019 that's based on just my manual entry, and another version for the same period based on a different method, if that makes sense. Excuse me. Awesome. Had another question in the chat from Pauline. Are we going to have one of these that will give us more info on the other options on the GL accounts, particularly the top three options on the left upper corner? So I'm assuming you mean there the account type, sales tax, and taxable status. Is that correct? Or are we talking about internal statement, and external number? Statement. Okay, gotcha. All right, so I can go through that now, actually. So the internal statement number, we call them bucket numbers. That's for our internal financial reporting. So it's basically a way for you to summarize your financials. A lot of people use that when they're going to submit to the bank and something like that, and they just want a simple, balance sheet or income statement, not the typical one you get out of our accounting system, that can be several pages long because it's detailing each individual account. So what that internal statement number allows you to do is if you have multiple accounts, like I do in this case, I got 10 or so different checking accounts, and let's say when I do my summary statement, I just want to sum the total of all those accounts into one bucket or cell on the sheet that just says cash and bank. So what I can do with this internal statement number is plug in the same bucket number there. So let's say 405, for example, for each account. And when I run my internal financial statements, which is available through the accounting reports under General Ledger, if you go down to dealership financial statements here, you can run the balance sheet or P&L. I'll run the P&L for you just to give you an example. We'll do November. And I may not have all my buckets set up here, so the first thing I'll get is an audit telling me that I have accounts that don't have buckets set up. So that's going to be the first report you'll get if you don't have all your buckets set up. It'll tell you which accounts and what the issue is. and then after that, it'll give you the actual statement. All right. Now, how do I know which statement number to put on which GL account? That is available in this report, the spreadsheet bucket numbers report. All right, so if you check off that option there and then hit show report, and there actually is another webinar that kind of goes into this a little more detail. So the same thing, first thing you'll get is an audit. It always gives you an audit if any of your GL accounts are missing a bucket number. But once the audit generates, the next thing it'll give you, this is your balance sheet bucket statement. So it's telling you that bucket number 404 is cash on hand, 405 is cash in bank, 406 is contracts in transit, etc. It goes down to your receivables, other assets, inventory, rental equipment and leasing equipment. Then you have your fixed asset here. So these numbers you see here are your bucket numbers or statement numbers. And then you got all your liabilities over here. So what that means is if I want specific GL accounts to go into this bucket on the statement, then I need to set that number on the GL account here on the internal statement. All right? And you can basically configure that however you see fit. You'll notice there are some empty spaces that don't have a description, but they have a bucket number. That allows you to expand or grow or even customize your statement a little bit. So if you want to break your inventory down even further, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 additional sales there that you can use, or buckets that you can use to kind of expand that. You can also change these actual descriptions. So where it says cash on hand or cash in bank, if you go to modify bucket descriptions here, you can actually change those descriptions. And you'll also see the blank ones. If you want to use one of those blank ones, you can set the description you want to use for that empty bucket there. So there's a lot of ways you can customize. And this is all for the internal statement. The external statement is the 20 group financial statement. And that one's the Excel spreadsheet. It has multiple tabs in it, and each tab gives you a different snapshot of different financial and analytics on your company. So same idea, though, is basically a cell on a spreadsheet. If you want balances in multiple accounts to summarize in that cell, then you set those GL accounts to that specific bucket. All right. With the 20 group, we assist you with the setup. It's a part of the package when you get it. And we kind of go through them, have you validate it, make sure everything's pointed to the right bucket. And so you don't have issues going forward. All right. That one is actually accessed directly from the accounting module. So you don't have to go to reporting. You simply go to tools and you go to external financial statements there. And it'll generate that 20 group report. It's based on a GM statement. All right. And then this other, for the internal statement, this other report is the income statement buckets. So total sales, 1,002. So basically it's saying all of your income or revenue accounts go to bucket number 1002. There's a little note over here that says all your cost accounts go to 1003. So that takes care of a lot of them, and then you just have to worry about how you want to break down or bucket your expenses. All right, and these are all the available buckets for you for expenses. And again, you can change these descriptions. So if you don't have, memberships, dues, and publications, you can repurpose that bucket for something else if you wanted to. Had another question here from Denise. Can you automatically designate what cost will be used in calculating the historical pack per unit sold and project that with various unit sold estimations and projected expenses? At the moment, I would say no. That is good feedback, though, that we can get as we build out the web version and the accounting piece of it. That may be something that we need to look more at. So I would say to properly answer that, I'd probably want to look at your specific scenario. So if you want to have a call offline to talk a little bit more about that, I feel like there's a lot of context I'm missing there, and I don't want to give you the wrong answer. questions? All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions at the moment. Go through the chat. Oh, dealer financials. Let me jump back to that. Had a question from Sheila, where we find the dealer financials in your reporting. Let me collapse everything just so I can walk you through the process. Under accounting reports, if you expand, and then general ledger, if you expand, if you go down to dealership financial statements, that'll give you the balance sheet, the P&L, and then you got your spreadsheet, bucket number description report. All right. If you don't want the audit when you run the report, you can uncheck the show bucket number audit here before you run it. All right, going to give it a few more moments here for any additional questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional, so I will go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thank you all for attending. Thanks for the questions. Those were really good questions. Can you project the number of sold units? From Denise. Currently, you cannot, but if you're not familiar with our ideas board, or if you just want to talk to somebody directly here to kind of get those ideas, because we like that type of stuff, to get it in our pipeline and our roadmap for the future product. While there is no way to do that currently, if that's something you would like to see in the future product, we'd be happy to kind of pick your brain on that and see how we can build it in. But the short answer is currently no. Yeah, with the budgets, kind of just lets you forecast dollar figures as opposed to unit counts. Awesome. Thank you, Lori, for attending. Thank you, Pauline, for that feedback. Hopefully you guys found it helpful and some things you can implement in your day-to-day that you may not be using. We're always looking for increased product adoption, so doing these webinars, kind of showing you guys some of the things you may not be aware of, is the sole purpose of them. All right, just giving it another once over to see if we got anything. Nothing out there at the moment. All right, so I'll go ahead and conclude. Again, thank you guys for your attention. We will be having more of these. You guys haven't already seen the schedule. Again, this one was recorded. There'll be an email going out with the link to the recording. And that link will also have a link for you if you want to go and register for the future ones that are coming up. Again, hope this was all useful for you. There's a survey that'll come to you when you exit the webinar, so please take the time to fill it out. It only takes a couple of minutes, and just let us know how we're doing, if you felt it was useful, what we could do better, and we'd be happy to hear that feedback and implement those changes into the future for you. So again, thank you, and have a great day.